Welcome back to the Filmmaker's Blog. My name is Kevin, and I hope you guys are staying sane and safe during this quarantine time. But I have a really special video for you guys, because this video was suggested by one of you. Spencer asks, can you make a video detailing your coloring process for the film? What film, you ask? A couple weeks ago, I dropped a new short film on my channel called The Long Walk. Go ahead and check it out. The link will be in the description below. Before we get started, there are two things that I want to mention. First is that this video is not exactly a color grading tutorial. This is just going to be about the process, kind of the thinking behind the color grading. If you're new to the channel, I make a ton of filmmaking videos all surrounding lighting and cinematography, but we also branch out on many different topics like we're doing today. And of course, I take my suggestions from my subscribers that they leave in the comments, make videos about that as well. So if you're interested in that, consider subscribing, and let's get on with the video. From the get-go, we knew this film would start with a drone shot. It was a simple way to show the scope of our story. With these large, soaring wide shots, this is the perfect time to set the color standard of the world that we're entering. Immediately, I went to a warm orange tone, although I didn't want to absolutely crank it to the max. My goal was to make it the leading prominent color, but still have the grade seem somewhat realistic. To me, the outdoor scenes make me think of the Wild West, calling mostly to the uncertainty that lies beyond the horizon and giving the film a sense of adventure. Time of day was another factor that elevated the color. The intention was to color the film to feel the heat of the day in every outdoor shot. When you add the orange color grade to it, it only emphasizes the look and brings it all together. So I want to start out with the gear that we're actually using to color grade, because I feel like that is actually a part of the process. Just like when you're talking about cinematography, a lot of the times the camera you're using and the camera specs come up. So for this project, I used DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve is a free color grading and editing software that anyone can get. It's actually free. The software is amazing. I can't recommend it enough. For my monitor, I am using the 32-inch Asus PA329Q. Pro tip, get yourself a quality monitor. I needed something that was easy on the eyes because I'm migraine prone, but I was also looking for something that had color accuracy and could be color calibrated, a good size, as well as can float between color spaces. And this can float between sRGB and Adobe RGB. So I definitely recommend getting something that you'll be happy with, because you're gonna be staring at this thing for hours on end. For the night scenes, my focus was on contrast and color contrast. The color contrast gets involved with the return of red light in the form of fire and completes its look with a warm foreground and a cool moonlight background. I also wanted to keep the night scenes fairly bright, but have a lot of contrast showcasing the shadows on the characters' faces. Although this was the idea for all of the night scenes, I did decide to venture away from this idea during our first conflict in the story. In this scene, I wasn't afraid of letting most of the frame fall into complete darkness. Considering this is more of an intense scene compared to the others, the color and lighting mimic more of the classic horror style: hard light and lots of shadow. Bitrate determines the amount of color shades in each color channel. There are 3 color channels: red, green, and blue. At 8-bit, there are 256 shades in each color channel. And if you multiply all 3 of those together, you'll get around 16.7, almost 16.8 million possible colors. Now that sounds like a lot, but once you move on to 10-bit, it's really not that much. At 10-bit, each color channel has 1024 shades of that color. So 1024 red, green, and blue. When you multiply all of those 3 things together, you get around 1 billion colors. Why this is important for color grading is because shooting in 10-bit gives you much more leeway in the color grading process than shooting in 8-bit, and allows you to stretch your footage further before it falls apart. I'm not going to talk about this any further. I just wanted to mention that there are bit rates higher than 10. There's 12, 16, 24, and so on. A low bit rate will again show banding where the image is chunky, and a higher bit rate will have a smooth gradient. Next is chroma sampling, and chroma sampling is basically compression, and there's three main types of chroma sampling. There's 444, 422, and 420. Now, what the heck does this mean? Well, each number plays a role in explaining what it means. The first number is the amount of pixels that we're sampling from. The second number is the amount of pixels we're sampling on the first row, and the third number is the amount of pixels we're sampling on the second row. So imagine each sample is 2 rows of 4 pixels long. For 444, we're sampling 4 pixels, and on the top row, we're sampling all 4 pixels, and the bottom row, we're sampling all 4 pixels. This is the best color sample because we're sampling every single pixel. There is no compromise. For 422, every 4 pixels, we're sampling 2 pixels on the top row and 2 pixels on the bottom row. You can already see that we're losing some color information, but at least we're still sampling a couple of pixels instead of none of them at all. Now that brings me to 420. For every 4 pixels, we sample 2 pixels on the top row and 0 on the bottom row. Now we don't just throw away those pixels and put black space in there. Instead, we'll duplicate the first line to the second line. So it will be 2 lines that are identical in their sampling. As you can probably tell, 444 is the best and 420 has the least amount of color information. Similar to bitrate, the better the chroma sampling, the more you have to work with when color grading. So for this film, I actually shot this at ProRes 422 10-bit. Could I have shot at a better codec or bitrate or even chroma sample? Yes, I could have, but there is a drawback with doing that. The media sizes get a lot bigger, you have a lot more gigabytes to worry about, and I just didn't have the memory cards to be able to do that. So this was a happy medium between having the flexibility in post as well as having the right amount of media on set. Okay, we're done with technical talk. We are done with technical talk. Now we can actually get more into the color grading process. I just felt that was really important because if you are trying to heavily color grade an 8-bit 420 image, you're gonna be doing more damage than good when it comes down to it. So might as well just not even try to stretch that image very far. Instead, make sure that you're shooting with the correct chroma sampling, correct bit rate on a good codec. Then you'll have success. For the indoor scenes, I wanted a dirty, gritty feel that was different than anything we have seen so far in the movie. After some trial and error, I fell on a very slight green tone in the image. Green usually brings out the sickly features in skin tone, and just the right amount of it gave this scene its gritty edge it needed. This sequence also has much more contrast than normal. I really tried to push and darken the shadows to create an ominous look to this sequence. I colored each shot in 2 or 3 parts. The first thing I did was create a primary basic color. This is where I take the raw log clip and put a basic normal grade on it. I take the lows and bring them down to accurately represent black, and I take the mids and highs and place them to represent the brightness that I want for the image. I make this layer or node the jumping off point for all of my experimentation down the road. And I do that because if I ever do some tweaks that I want to undo, or I'm not really digging the grade anymore, I can just delete the nodes that I've added on top of this one or reset them, and I still have my primary grade. That way I always have a starting point that's further ahead than just the uncolored raw file. So in the second step, or second layer or node, this is where I continue to change the image based on contrast, saturation, just other things that go hand in hand with a primary basic color. I don't do this for every clip because not every clip needs more contrast or more of anything. I'm just telling you this as a way to drive home that I like to color in layers to be more in control. So after that, I make a new node, and this one is all about color shifts. And this is my process for this film specifically because I knew that I wanted some strong color shifts throughout the film. It made things a lot easier because I did try to do this color shifting on a primary node that also had a basic grade on it, and it didn't look the same. It just didn't quite work. When I separated it, I was able to feather it into the image a lot easier. Not only that, but matching different shots in the same scene became a lot easier too, because I just copied and pasted the hue node or hue layer from one image to the next, and it just needed a little bit of tweaking before it looked pretty much the same. After all of that was done, I basically now have my final image. But sometimes I wanted to change specific colors in the image to just make it a little more lively or just be a little creative with it. And a couple examples of that is one of the opening drone shots in the beginning of the film. For the drone shot, I felt like the image was way too brown, even though this is a post-apocalyptic story and everything's pretty much run down. I wanted a little bit more color. So to solve that, I was able to color pick and eyedrop some of the leaves and debris that was on the ground and change that color to red. And that really brought out the image for me because it created a lot more color contrast. I mean, you have an orange brown, which is kind of the neutral color across the entire image. And then you have red peeking through and then green in the background. So instead of just 2 colors in the image, I've created 3. The second time I did this was for the barn shot. I wanted to spice up this establishing shot a little bit. And in the grade, I was able to do that. So this is the original shot with a normal grade, and I decided to darken it heavily to kind of create more of a silhouette effect over the night sky. And then I even saturated the blue in the sky and made some of the clouds on the right side of the frame purple by color selecting and changing the hue. Now this was the first project that I used DaVinci Resolve on. So while I was going, I was learning new features and making the grades better and better. Something that I learned after this project and for the music video I shot a couple months ago now was tracking masks and face tracking and doing specific color grades for characters' faces. Now, if I knew how to do that back then I probably would have put in a lot more of those in the film, which I did in the music video that I shot, and I'll link that below if you want to see that too. But part of the power of your own skill in color grading or editing or anything software based is the knowledge of the software itself. And I find myself continually learning this thing and continually getting better the next project I grade. This project was a lot of fun to shoot in color. I loved creating very distinct looks based on the location and the time of day for this film. And we even shot some day for night because our shooting schedule was all out of whack for one day, and the only time to fit in a scene was around 4 o'clock, but it was supposed to take place at like 10. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're looking for more filmmaking content, I have some free filmmaking tools in the description below in the new FILMMAKER'S VAULT, including a lighting ebook. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check it out. As always guys, comment video suggestions that you want to see on this channel. This video is proof that I read them and actually make them. A lot of your suggestions are great, so that's why I make them, so keep them coming. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's video, even though you already know it's every Friday.